Hello everyone, Süleymanoğlu here. In this series, I am going to read Anne of Green Gables by Lucy Maud Montgomery to you. In this video, we are only going to read the epigraph of the author, the introduction, the setting of the novel, and the main characters, plus we'll quickly look at a few maps of the locations of the novel. So let's start with the epigraph. The good stars met in your horoscope, made you of spirit and fire and dew. To the memory of my father and mother. The author's epigraph is from Evelyn Hope, a poem from 1855 written by the English poet Robert Browning. Okay, so as I said, we'll go until here in this video. We will actually start reading the novel in the next video. Introduction. There's such a lot of different Annes in me. I sometimes think that is why I'm such a troublesome person. If I was just the one Anne, it would be ever so much more comfortable, but then it wouldn't be half so interesting. Anne of Green Gables. In 1907, the Canadian author Lucy Maud Montgomery wrote in her journal that she had recently discovered an old notebook in which she had jotted down an interesting story from the local paper. Elderly couple apply to orphan asylum for a boy. By mistake, a girl is sent them. A year later, in 1908, Montgomery introduced the world to one of the brightest and most brilliant characters it has ever known, the red-headed orphan Anne Shirley. Characters live inside their books, don't they? Most of the time. But every so often, a character comes along who is so vibrant, so remarkable, so fully herself, that she seems to leap right off of the page and take on a life of her own. Anne, spelled with an E, as she herself insists, first delighted readers in Anne of Green Gables. The book was a sensation. Its heroine would go on to feature in 5 sequels, and Montgomery would also write 3 more books about grown-up Anne's children. Anne of Green Gables has been made into movies, TV shows, musicals, and even in 2022 a ballet performed by London Children's Ballet featuring the young dancers shown here. Movies, TV shows, and plays have all been made about Anne, from a silent film in 1919 to several stage musicals, a Japanese animated children's show, and multiple television miniseries, including the recent Anne with an E on Netflix. More than a century after Anne's first appearance, her popularity shows no sign of fading. So just what is it about this little orphan girl that's so extraordinary? In part, it's her striking appearance, fiery red hair, which she hates, freckles, and big expressive eyes full of spirit and vivacity. But it isn't just the image of Anne that readers hold dear, it's her voice. Anne, 11 years old and alone in the world when we first meet her, can talk like blazes. Words simply spill out of her, big, juicy, enthusiastic words full of boundless curiosity about the world, heartfelt appreciation for its beauty, and dreams as wide and glorious as the summer sky. Anne's imagination is her great gift to herself and to us. It helps her through the loneliness of her early childhood, and it sweeps us up in a great, invigorating gust, carrying us through fairy realms and haunted forests, romantic adventures, and hilarious mishaps. In 1908, girls were expected to be ladylike and polite, to learn how to keep house and, probably, someday, to grow up and marry. They were not expected to be ambitious, to be voracious readers with huge vocabularies, to be brave and hot-tempered, to insist on living passionate, inquisitive, independent lives. But Anne Shirley defies expectations. Oh, it's delightful to have ambitions, she says, dreaming of a bold and exciting future. I'm so glad I have such a lot. And there never seems to be any end to them. That's the best of it. It does make life so interesting. Anne stays with us to this day because she was never a creature of her time. Lucy Maud Montgomery created a heroine who was, and is, no commonplace soul. Anne dreams and yearns, gets angry and makes mistakes, is loving and loyal and silly and serious all in one. In Anne of Green Gables, we journey with her as she grows from a clever, starry-eyed child into a thoughtful, soulful young adult. Though Anne learns many a lesson, perhaps the greatest wisdom and the greatest joy to be taken from her story is to keep the flame of our curiosity and our enthusiasm always alive. If we see the world through Anne's eyes, we will always see something beautiful, something worth discovering more about. And, as she herself says, one can't stay sad very long in such an interesting world, can one? The setting of the novel. It's a million times nicer to be Anne of Green Gables than Anne of Nowhere in particular, isn't it? Anne of Green Gables. Lucy Maud Montgomery set Anne of Green Gables on a partly fictionalized version of the real Prince Edward Island, her beloved birthplace and, for much of her life, her home. Prince Edward Island, the smallest of Canada's provinces, is a crescent-shaped island nestled between the mainland provinces of New Brunswick and Nova Scotia in the Gulf of St. Lawrence off of Canada's eastern coast. See it on the map here, along with New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. Prince Edward Island is only about 2,000 square miles in size, and in the late 1800s, when Anne of Green Gables takes place, its population was just over 100,000. The island's inhabitants made their living mostly by farming, fishing, and exporting their crops. As Anne immediately notices when she arrives from Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island is an extremely beautiful place with green rolling hills and forests, wildflowers and rocky ocean inlets, and the striking red soil and sand caused by high levels of iron oxide in the earth. Avonlea and Other Towns. For her novel, Montgomery invented a series of fictional towns and villages based on real locations from her life. One exception is Charlottetown, the real capital city of Prince Edward Island. Avonlea, the town which becomes Anne's home, is based on the coastal village of Cavendish, where Montgomery grew up in the home of her maternal grandparents, Alexander and Lucy McNeill. About 5 miles along the coast to the west is the town of White Sands, a fictional version of the seaside town of North Rustico, which was known for its hotel and the rich American tourists who visited there. To get to White Sands from Avonlea, Montgomery's characters travel along the Shore Road, a road that still exists today as part of a long scenic coastal route known as Blue Heron Drive. Montgomery noted in her journal, "The Shore Road has a very real existence and is a very beautiful drive." Inland from Avonlea, about 4 miles to the southeast, is the town of Carmody. Montgomery based Carmody, which is larger and busier than Avonlea, on the real town of Stanley. In her journals, she describes Stanley as a pretty village that, when she was a young child, seemed big and impressive. The hub of the universe, or of our solar system at the very least. Other towns that feature in Anne's story include Bright River, the location of the train station, based on the town of Hunter River about 10 miles inland from Cavendish. Newbridge, the location of the beautiful avenue of flowering apple trees, and names the White Way of Delight, based on the town of New Glasgow. Hopetoun, the location of the orphanage, which Montgomery would have drawn from the real orphanage located in Nova Scotia's capital city of Halifax, and Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island's capital and the only place Montgomery doesn't give a fictional name. Charlottetown, which would have been overwhelmingly big and busy to someone raised in rural Cavendish, is the location of Queen's College, based on the real school Montgomery attended, Prince of Wales College, and of the large mansion that belongs to Miss Josephine Barry, the aunt of Anne's best friend Diana. The city is all the way across the island from Cavendish, about 25 miles to the southwest. In the late 1800s, a journey to Charlottetown would have taken most of the day. We see a map of Anne's Prince Edward Island with Carmody, Avonlea, White Sands, Newbridge, Spencervale, and Bright River, with Gulf of St. Lawrence with a scale of miles. Next location, next setting, the house called Green Gables. Homesteads in the late 1800s often had their own lovely names. Miss Josephine Barry's mansion in Charlottetown is called Beechwood. Her niece, Anne's friend Diana, lives at a house called Orchard Slope. Nearby is Lind's Hollow, the house of Mrs. Rachel Lynde, an opinionated neighbor who loves to gossip but has a kind heart. Just as she based the imagined towns in her novel on real places, Montgomery also based many of the houses on real houses from her childhood. Lind's Hollow was based on a house that belonged to Pierce McNeill, the cousin of Montgomery's grandfather. In her journals, Montgomery wrote, "The brook that runs below the Cuthbert place and through Lind's Hollow is, of course, my own dear brook of the woods which runs through Pierce's Hollow." And then, of course, there is Green Gables, the house that becomes Anne's beloved home. Montgomery based Green Gables, the homestead of the siblings Marilla and Matthew Cuthbert, not on the house of her grandparents where she herself grew up, but on the home of David and Margaret McNeill, cousins of her grandfather, whom she often visited as a child. She wrote in her journals, "Green Gables was drawn from David McNeill's house, though not the house so much as the situation and scenery, and the truth of my description of it is attested by the fact that everybody has recognized it." Though, she added humorously, David McNeill's house was by no means as tidy as I pictured Green Gables. Let's read the caption here too. Lucy Maud Montgomery based Green Gables on the home of her grandfather's cousins, whom she often visited as a child. That house has been restored and is now a National Historic Site in Cavendish, Prince Edward Island, Canada. A gable, by the way, is a triangular top part of the wall of a house where it meets the angled lines of the roof. Though Montgomery drew much of the setting of her novels from life, she also wove plenty of imagined elements into Anne's world. "The White Way of Delight," Montgomery wrote in her journal, is pure imagination, as are the little pool at the hillside of violets that Anne names Willowmere and Violet Vale. As for the romantic birch path, which Anne and Diana take to school, Montgomery wrote that it exists somewhere, I know not where. I have a picture of it, a photo which was published in the Outing magazine one year. Somewhere in America that lane of birches is. The population of Prince Edward Island in the time of Anne. Before people from Europe came to Canada, the area now called Prince Edward Island was populated by an indigenous tribe called the Mi'kmaq. Their name for the island was Abegweit, I'm not sure about my pronunciation, or land cradled by the waves. The first Europeans to arrive and lay claim to the island came from France. Throughout the 1600s and 1700s, they drove many of the Mi'kmaq away and began to settle the island, which they named Ile Saint-Jean, St. John's Island. Many Mi'kmaq people also died from exposure to new diseases brought by the Europeans, such as smallpox, measles, and the flu. The Mi'kmaq people, however, never wholly left Prince Edward Island. They remain there still, and today their community is thriving. In 1758, the British gained control of the island during a conflict called the 7 Years' War. In 1769, the island officially became a British colony, and the new settlers began to deport many of the French-speaking inhabitants back to the mainland. Most of these new settlers were Scottish, fleeing from disease, starvation, and ongoing repression by England. Thousands of Scottish people emigrated to Canada in the mid-1700s. In 1798, Prince Edward Island was given its lasting name after the fourth son of the British King George III. By that year, half the population of the island was Scottish. In Anne of Green Gables, Matthew and Marilla Cuthbert, who adopt Anne, are undoubtedly of Scottish heritage, as is Anne herself. Along with the Scottish-descended inhabitants of Prince Edward Island, there were still other communities on the island in the late 1800s. In Chapter 1, when Marilla mentions half-grown little French boys, she is referring to children from the small French-speaking population that was still present in the eastern parts of the island. These communities were very poor and often malnourished, which is why Marilla calls the French boys half-grown. They generally worked as servants and farm laborers. Throughout the 1800s and early 1900s, there remained a good deal of tension between the island's French population and its inhabitants who were of British and Scottish descent. Main characters in the novel. These are just going to be one-sentence summaries about their appearances or characteristics. Anne Shirley, an orphan girl with red hair and a huge imagination. Marilla Cuthbert, an unmarried, rather severe older woman who lives on a homestead called Green Gables in the town of Avonlea on Prince Edward Island. Matthew Cuthbert, Marilla's brother, a shy, gentle older man who works the farm at Green Gables. Mrs. Rachel Lynde, an opinionated but kind-hearted neighbor of Matthew and Marilla Cuthbert. Diana Barry, Anne's best friend who lives at a house called Orchard Slope near Green Gables. Mrs. Barry, Diana's very strict mother. Minnie May, Diana's little sister. Miss Josephine Barry, Diana's aunt, a wealthy older lady with a big house in the city of Charlottetown. Jane Andrews, a school friend of Anne's, a calm, practical girl. Ruby Gillis, another friend of Anne's who is flirtatious and emotional. Josie Pye, a schoolmate of Anne's who has a mean, jealous streak. Mr. Teddy Phillips, the teacher at Avonlea School, a pompous man mostly disliked by the students. Gilbert Blythe, a handsome, mischievous schoolmate of Anne's with whom she has an intense rivalry. Charlie Sloane, a schoolmate of Anne's who has a crush on her. Moody Spurgeon McPherson, a nervous schoolmate of Anne's who struggles with his grades. Mrs. Allen, the wife of Avonlea's new minister, a kind and thoughtful woman. Miss Muriel Stacy, a new teacher at the school in Avonlea, energetic and full of new ideas. And that's it for today, except for the map. So this is Anne's Avonlea, the places that we just mentioned, like Lynch Hollow, Carmody Road, goes to Carmody. The Long Lane, the brook, which goes under the log bridge and leads to Dryas Bubble. Green Gables, where Anne lives. Lover's Lane, back pasture. And here are the Shore Road, the church, Blythe Homestead, White Sands, Lake of Shining Waters, Orchard Slope, Haunted Wood, Willowmere, Violet Vale, Birch Path, Avonlea School, Spruce Grove, William Bell's Farm, and this site will be Newbridge. But I believe that's it. Yeah, that's it for today. I am going to read the actual chapters from another copy, another PDF, because I know this PDF misses a few chapters. So don't be surprised if the fonts or other things change in the next video. But until then, take good care of yourselves and bye bye.